So the big PlayStation 5 reveal just wrapped up on YouTube, and here's a little snippet of it.
Sufficiently far from the default HRTF, that's the red dot here, that they can toggle between PS4 style and PS5 style audio and not sense much difference.
Did you understand any of that? Because, well, really, I didn't either. In this video, though, we're basically going to talk about the specs that were revealed for the PlayStation 5, some of the more interesting comments that were made, and then just talk about what was wrong with this presentation in general. What's up, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's talk about the PlayStation 5, what specs were revealed, what interesting information was revealed, and why this presentation to me was just a huge misstep. So the presentation was done by Mark Cerny of PlayStation, of course, who is the lead developer for the PlayStation brand of systems, who happens to look a bit like Dana Carvey. I wish he would have made some jokes like Dana Carvey, but you know what? We take what we can get. Now, of course, this presentation was primarily to talk about the specs of the system, so I wasn't expecting anything too crazy, but what we ended up getting was just a really bizarre presentation that I think left a lot of people confused and a lot of people wanting more. Now, as far as the interesting information was concerned about the PlayStation 5 press release event, we basically learned about all of the specs of the system. We got hardcore numbers, concrete numbers when it comes to things like the PlayStation 5, as far as teraflops and all sorts of things are concerned. I will try to make this information as interesting as possible, as a lot of this means absolutely nothing to me, but we will talk about it. So one of the main things that the PlayStation 5 is going to bring to the table is, of course, a solid state drive, which will eliminate things like loading screens, long patches, and games will boot a lot faster. Now, this is something that we've heard, of course, about the Xbox Series X will be containing. It looks like it is pretty much the future of consoles going forward. It, of course, has been around for PC gaming for quite a while now, but now it's being integrated into home console gaming, which I think will be a very good thing. Doing things like eliminating load times and all these patches that always seem to happen will be a very good thing when it comes to making your games more accessible, being able to just jump into these games and being able to play these games. Now, one thing I thought was very interesting was the topic of backwards compatibility. Now, we've been hearing all sorts of crazy rumors about the PlayStation 5 and backwards compatibility, that it'll play every lineage PlayStation console from PlayStation 1 up until the PlayStation 4, which I thought was a bit of a stretch. Now, Mark Cerny did talk about the backwards compatibility of the PlayStation 5, and honestly, for me, it kind of left a lot to be desired. Now, obviously, the PlayStation 5's architecture is very different than the PlayStation's 4 architecture, but on day one for the PlayStation 5, you won't be able to access all of your PlayStation 4 games. Mark Cerny said that the top 100 PlayStation 4 games will be available at launch. At least that's what they are going for, and how that's determined is based on things like playtime. So the most played PlayStation 4 games will be the games that will be backwards compatible on the PlayStation 5 on day one. So I am definitely not holding my breath for any sorts of PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 stuff on the PlayStation 5, at least on day one, especially when it seems like they are not prioritizing backwards compatibility, much like a lot of people were saying they were going to. There was a lot of rumors, like I said, floating around. PlayStation 3 would have been just absolutely insane for them to do because of the architecture of the PlayStation 3 being so complex, but it seems like you're only going to have access to about 100 PlayStation 4 games at launch. Now, obviously, that's not a big deal, but if the game you want to play isn't necessarily supported, I can see that being a bit of an annoyance. Now, of course, one of the more interesting things from this presentation was actually getting concrete data for the PlayStation 5 as far as things like teraflops are concerned. Obviously, teraflops are the new bit wars of the modern era. It used to be, how many bits did your system have? The Jaguar has 64 bits. It's the best system ever. And many people were interested to see how many teraflops the PlayStation 5 would have. Of course, the Xbox Series X was confirmed to have 12 teraflops, so was PlayStation going to be able to match that? Well, no, they're not. The PlayStation 5 will have 10.3 teraflops instead of what the Xbox Series X has at 12 teraflops. The other information is a CPU of 8 times Zen 2 cores at 3.5 gigahertz. The GPU architecture is a custom RDNA2. The memory interface is 16 gigabytes of GDDR6. The memory bandwidth is 448 gigabytes a second. Internal storage of a custom 825 gigabyte SSD card. It will have a 4K UHD Blu-ray drive on it, and the system will support external storage of USB HDD support so that you can add more hard drive space. And when you look at things on paper, obviously, yes, it does not have the same amount of teraflops as the Xbox Series X has, but to me, that really means means absolutely nothing, because it's not about how much raw power you have, it's what you do with that power. If that was the case, everyone would have bought an Atari Jaguar over a Sega Genesis. You had a 64-bit system compared to a 16-bit system. What it really boils down to is, of course, the games, how the games are utilizing this power and how the games are. Now, I think it will be interesting in terms of third-party releases that are multi-platform, if you'll see any sort of substantial difference between the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X version of the game. I can't imagine it would be that big, especially when you look at how all of the systems have had differentiating power when it came to just raw specs in previous generations, and there really wasn't that big of a deal between these things. So overall, a lot of questions that were around the PlayStation 5 as far as the technical perspective of the system have now been answered. We know about the teraflops, we know about the GPU, we know what basically PlayStation 5 is going to bring to the table in terms of raw horsepower. So you would think that this presentation would have gone over well with many people, but it really didn't. And that's what I want to focus on for the rest of the video, is just how sort of out of touch this presentation felt. Now, I get it. You guys are going to be in the comment section saying, well, this was supposed to be for GDC. This was obviously a GDC presentation, and I get that. A lot of this information was obviously for developers of the PlayStation 5, people that are going to be putting their games on the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X to sort of figure out what additional things they're going to be able to use with this new powerful hardware. The problem is you have to adapt to situations. You have to adapt to what is happening in the real world, and PlayStation did not seem to adapt whatsoever with this presentation. You basically had Mark Cerny up there talking about just the most bizarre and minuscule tech things for a 50+ minute presentation. There was like weird cutouts. I'm pretty sure those people in the audience weren't actual people in the audience, all four of them. I'm pretty sure they were green screened in. The whole presentation felt like it was very green screen. But the thing of it is that you didn't really learn anything from a gamer perspective about the PlayStation 5. You did not learn about what the system actually looks like. You did not learn about any of the games that are going to be running on the system. I felt like if you would have done all this technical mumbo jumbo and you would have talked about how the PlayStation 5 is going to play PlayStation 4 games better, people don't want to hear that. People want to see that. You need to put in the practicality aspect of it and allow people to sort of learn how these games are going to look better, how these games are going to run better. And Sony just didn't do that. They just talked about what the things are going to be doing. They just talked about what the system is going to be doing, and they didn't really give anything for actual gamers, people who don't care about the tech side of things, to actually be excited for their system. The presentation itself just felt like something that it didn't need to be. It felt like that was going to be their game developers conference presentation, and they didn't sort of adapt it to make it more interesting. When you're hosting it on your official PlayStation page and making it a big deal about the PlayStation 5 reveal, you need to have something to back up that hype. You need to get people excited about your system. And honestly, I feel that that is one thing that Microsoft has done very well so far with the Xbox Series X. Just doing that little presentation at the Video Game Awards 2019, where they showed the system and they talked briefly about what it was going to do, and then did a press release for all of the technical specs of the system, I feel is way more engaging than going up on stage talking about technical stuff for 50+ minutes and then not having anything to sort of back it up, not having any actual footage of games. We've seen Hellblade 2 running with the Xbox Series X hardware. Of course, I don't necessarily feel that that's going to be indicative of in-game footage. Yes, it was in-game assets being used, but I don't necessarily think that the final product is going to look that good, but maybe it will. At least you have something to take away from everything that Xbox has done with the Xbox Series X so far. You have something to show when you're talking about things like that. With the PlayStation 5, we don't really have anything to show for it. We know technical specs. We know that backwards compatibility is going to be spotty at best at the launch of the system, with just the top 100 games being supported, at least according to Mark Cerny, and that's the way things are going right now. I don't need to hear about all the technical aspects of your audio. I don't need to hear about the raw power and how the power is going to be used. I want to see how this raw power is going to be used. Now, like I said, I understand that this was probably a presentation done for Game Developers Conference 2020, but you need to adapt. If you're putting this out on a big stage, you need to make people excited about your product. And I'm sure a lot of tech people will be excited for it, but for the average gamer or the gamer who just wants to know about the PlayStation 5, you're really taking taking away not a whole hell of a lot. They didn't even show the system, man. Like, I want to see what the system looks like. I want to see how PlayStation 4 games are going to run on the PlayStation 5, what sort of enhancements are going to be made. Just don't talk about the stuff, show the stuff. And I feel like Sony definitely made a bit of a misstep. It's not going to cannibalize the PlayStation 5. I saw a lot of people saying, oh, PlayStation 5 is doomed. It's not doomed. Everyone has a bad presentation from time to time, but I feel like this was Sony's first chance to really make a stake in the upcoming Xbox Series X versus PlayStation 5 console war that's going to happen. I mean, it always happens. And yes, it might be in the mind of consumers, but consumers are going to want a reason to get the Xbox Series X over the PlayStation 5 or vice versa. And I feel so far, Microsoft has definitely been doing a lot better job of convincing consumers to go towards the Microsoft brand than Sony has with the PlayStation brand. Alright, so those are my thoughts on the big PlayStation 5 reveal. We got the tech specs that we were looking for, but we didn't really get that presentation that we were looking for, that flair, that pizzazz, that sort of thing to make people excited about the PlayStation 5. Instead, we pretty much got like a college PowerPoint lecture, and I don't know, man. It just didn't sit very well with me. I thought it was very boring, and I feel like it was a lot of stuff that could have been condensed into like a 10 to 15 minute presentation with more of the nitty gritty stuff going out in a press release to sort of quell those interests of what is going on with the tech side of things. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this was very interesting to you. So be sure to let me know in the comments section down below what you thought of the big PlayStation 5 reveal. Are you sort of with my mindset that they should have shown the stuff in action rather than just talking about it? Or do you think that Sony did a good enough job with this presentation? And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Be sure to check out other videos on the channel. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up this week. Of course, the Resident Evil 3 demo is coming out very soon, so I want to take a look at that. We got Doom Eternal, we got Doom 64. Maybe I'll do something with Animal Crossing. I'm kind of on the fence about that, but we will see. But as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.